Okay, so thank you all and good evening. I am Liam. I'm co-founder of UBI Lab Wales, but tonight I think is all about the pledges. So just to give you some information, our public pledge is gathering some traction, and basically what we'd like to see is the more signatures, the better. Our aim is to mobilize the UBI conversation further into the public domain. So if I can ask one of the guys just to put the link in the chat, if you want to click that link and sign it as a member of the public, that would be great. Some of you also may be aware there's also the Senedd pledge, and we're currently at 103 signatures, which is absolute fantastic news. And also 23 of those signatures are actually Green Party candidates, and 4 of which are here to join our conversation tonight. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Anthony Slaughter, Green Party and candidate for Vale of Glamorgan and list candidate for South Wales Central. Then we've got Amelia Womack, again, Green Party constituent, a candidate for Newport West and South Wales East. We then have Lauren James, constituent candidate for Newport East and list candidate for South Wales East. And finally, we have Tomos Barlow, list candidate for Mid and West Wales. Did I get that right? Is that right? Didn't get any of that wrong, did I? Fab. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much. I've done the introductions and things as to who's here. I think the main point of this evening is just to get questions and the view of the Welsh Green Party. So I'd like to dive straight in to the conversation. And my first question is going to be aimed at Amelia. But obviously, any other participant within the conversation could come in at any time. Please feel free. But the first question would be, what do you consider the benefits of a UBI being?
It's really important when we talk about the benefits of a UBI that it isn't a silver bullet to every problem, but it does work to solve many of the problems that we have. And you can't look at what's happening across Wales or even across the UK and think that this system is working. It's not working because people are in exploitative work. People aren't given the support that they genuinely need to ensure that there's a safety net catching them from poverty. People aren't supported as there's an increase of technology that means that there are less jobs or even no jobs in some industries. And it's really vital with a universal basic income that this provides support for everyone. It rebalances so many things that have happened in our economy, whether that's patriarchal systems or racist systems, as people are able to get that support for even things like work that has gone unrecognised for so long as part of our economy, typically done by women in households. And I think when you look at Wales, when we say that 1 in 3 children live in poverty, it's important to ensure that every child is given the best opportunities in life. And it's clear that the current system just doesn't work to do that. So the lists from there on in are endless, aren't they? Looking to keep a roof over people's heads, looking to ensure that people aren't worrying about money. That leads into reducing mental health impacts. That leads to reducing even things like women fleeing abusive partners. They know that they've got some money in their pocket to be able to set up a new life. So I know it's hard to keep it to just a handful of things, but I think at the moment, the way that we can actually tackle some of the deep-rooted problems, the systemic problems that we have in how our economy and how our country works, is just what that fundamental shift just is core to it. But the opportunities from there on are endless, really.
Thank you, Amelia. Anybody else? Just jump in when you want to, and comment if you will. That'd be great. Thanks. Anybody else like to add anything on that point?
I think Amelia covered it perfectly. Really, it's all so blindingly obvious, isn't it? It's just what we've seen in the last year of the pandemic is how precarious so many people's lives are, and that is what's key to UBI. It's taking away that precariousness, freeing people up to explore how they want to live, how they want to work. And yeah, I think Amelia covered all the bases there on what the benefits are. And I'm guessing there's probably no one in this room who doesn't agree with all those benefits.
No, absolutely. I completely agree as well. You know, in my day job, I work in the housing sector within Rhondda and Taff, and it's probably one of the most deprived areas within Wales in terms of the quality of housing and things. So for me, from a professional level, it would be important to see what a UBI does in terms of how it affects the quality of housing as well. Because yes, it doesn't, we're not saying it's going to replace a housing benefit, but it gives the people the option to maybe top up their housing benefit then to have better quality accommodation. So yeah, I completely agree for, you know, with everything that Amelia said and what Anthony has also backed up this. So I guess you're right, Anthony, there's not much more we can add on that point, is there? So moving on to, I'm going to pick on you now, Anthony, for this one. So for those who support a UBI but are not party political, what would you say to convince them to support the Welsh Green Party?
Good question, very good question. Well, for us, UBI has been Green Party policy for a very, very long time. And like the climate emergency declarations, it is welcome to see other parties coming around to this. And it has been really encouraging to see the cross-party support amongst so many parties in Wales for UBI. But for us, it's always been a policy which is part of our bigger policy picture. Now, our policies come from a holistic overview of society and the system we want to create. And this is just one step. It's an indication of our core belief in fairness and justice. And it is key to that. Amelia touched on the justice stuff. So why people should come back behind Wales Green Party is because we mean it. We've been talking about it for a long time. And we are talking about UBI, as the architects of UBI intended it. We're seeing other parties come on board and making grand declarations of supporting UBI, and then talking about doing a trial run where 1,000 creatives chosen by some self-appointed politician will get a payment for 6 months. So it's quite often there's that ambition in Wales, in other political parties, that isn't met with implementation. And Greens in the Senate, Greens in local authorities, Greens in the room would hold power to account and make sure they delivered on the promises of UBI. It wouldn't just become something that was talked about at election time and then put back in the cupboard for another 5 years. We're serious about this. We've been talking about this for a long time. And if you want the other parties to take this message seriously, then supporting us helps strengthen that message.
Fabulous. Anybody else like to come in on that? I know obviously you've all got your viewpoints within your own party as well, so it'll be interesting to see the different dynamics within the party.
So I think what I would add to that is that you should look at the reasons you want a UBI and ask yourself which party is offering the solutions to those reasons. So as Anthony already said, it's not just about a UBI. It's about lifting people out of fuel poverty by retrofitting every home in Wales. It's about, you know, the party who are consistently tackling the biggest issues of the day, and not just because it's a cynical tactic to win votes from other parties, but because it's the right thing to do. And universal basic income is a bold and ambitious idea, and Wales Green Party has been there every single time with those bold and ambitious ideas. And really, if you want a UBI, don't accept anything less.
Absolutely.
I'd just add to Lauren's point as well, and Anthony's, on that systemic change and how embedded that is in our party. As Anthony said, this has been our policy since the founding days of the Green Party in the 1970s, well, the Ecology Party then, but we also look at how things operate in a very different way. So we recognise that, for example, the GDP is a terrible way of measuring an economy. You look at what's happening at the moment with coronavirus, and what our priorities as a country should be is people's health and well-being and mental health, and things that weren't on the agenda at the time they should be, because the economy was prioritised above all else. And so being unafraid to speak about these big issues is what we've always done in Wales Green Party. And I think it's really that bigger thinking that takes us out of the status quo. Because as I said before, the status quo isn't working, and the status quo is what got us into most of the problems that we're stuck in at the moment.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that. That's brilliant. So I just guess to move on to our next topic of conversation really is basically, how would you fund a UBI? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the direction of Anthony as well, because he talked about fairness. And I think sometimes a lot of the negative feeling towards a UBI is where you're going to pay for that from. So to balance it off, I'd like to take that back to Anthony then, just to talk about it, because he did talk about fairness in his last answer. So Anthony, if you could, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks. Just how can you pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? That's the question we always get asked about our radical policies, especially as we get nearer election time. I've just come off a call with NHS Workers Say No Wales about their campaign for a fair pay settlement, for a 50% pay settlement. And that's exactly what they're getting told. You know, we'll clap for you, we like you, we appreciate you, but there's no money there, we can't afford it. Who do you want us to take the money off to pay you? And that's the same argument that's used with UBI. And we can go, as we get nearer to time of launching the manifesto, which is a couple of weeks ago, there'll be some more detailed workings out. But for me, I don't like to get bogged down in the details. There are clear parts to this. We need a fairer taxation system for a start. We need fair corporation tax. We need to look at a one-off pandemic tax, all those businesses that have done so well out of the pandemic. That we need to rebalance our economy. This is the interesting thing about UBI. It starts a conversation that doesn't end. It's not just about we'll put this tool in there and it will make people's lives better in that incremental way. It starts a conversation about what money is for, what is fairness, what is equitable use of resources. So we look at fairer taxation systems to raise money, but on a purely practical level, our welfare system at the moment is top-heavy, bureaucratic, punishes people, I would say kills people. There's an inefficient use of money and a lot of money is wasted. UBI takes away so much of that bureaucracy. So there's, on a financial side, there's that argument that you're going to make savings there as well. So it's about rebalancing the economy to make it work for people. And something also that's quite close to my heart, and this came up in the conversation with the nurses, is we pay for what we have to pay for. We pay for what is right and we pay for what is just. And we've seen in the last year, we've had a decade of austerity. We've had this sort of farcical analogy that the national economy is somehow akin to a household budget. We all know it's not. And one of the lessons that came out of the pandemic is when the government needed to find money, it found it. After all those years of Theresa May telling us there wasn't a magic money tree, they found the money they had to find to keep society going. And this is no different. And you look back to post the end of the Second World War, as we came out of the Second World War, we were in far, far worse financial state than we are now. And we built the NHS and we built council housing because it was the right thing to do. We found the money. And that is always my core answer to this, is it is the right thing to do, is a just thing to do, it's a fair thing to do. And we're supposed to be the sixth richest, biggest economy in the world. We can afford to do this. And it's a false flag. It's a way of, and it was really, really disheartening in this conversation with the nurses. After the year they've been through, to be hit by that stone wall, suddenly the politicians are back to, yes, but we can't afford this. And as you said, as you alluded to in your question, who do you want us to take money off to pay for this? If that really is the answer, who do you want us to take money off to pay for this? It is the super rich who haven't been paying their share for a very long time.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Anthony. That was a full and rounded answer. I think everyone will agree. So, and I think, everything you said, people believe in. Amelia, did you put your hand up then? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, because I think that, as often with these things, people talk about it as a cost, but actually it's a genuine investment in people. And I think it's really important that it's recognised as such. As Anthony said, things like the NHS, that's an investment. It's about putting money in now for a better future. And we know the benefits of giving people finances to be able to live their lives in a meaningful way. And I think even when we're looking at coronavirus recovery, there are so many conversations that's about putting money in people's pockets, again, to stimulate the economy. But for us, it's to put money in people's pockets to ensure that they're supported and ensure that their well-being is recognised. And so lots of what, as the Green Party, we look at is how all of these systems work together. And as we've said before, the UBI is at the heart of our policies. So things like our Green New Deal have a universal basic income in, which means that we are able to use our carbon tax to offset the cost of a UBI, which already we have some offsets of the cost of universal basic income. Obviously, with the UBI, you wouldn't be paying out pensions, child benefit, and other benefits, not including things like housing benefits and things that we still need to invest in, as well as the current administration costs. I mean, when you look at things like job seekers allowance, well, universal credit, the fact that people have to jump through hoops to get money, and there are people paid as a checkbox exercise, not only does that have a huge impact on people's well-being, but it's a huge administration cost as well. And so these offsets it's really important in how we build that bigger vision. And if you look at where we are in Wales, obviously a carbon tax isn't something we're able to implement, as the current devolved powers are essentially for business rates and council tax. And this is why, and I assume why, the pledge for UBI Labs is to be lobbying Westminster. They are the ones that are going to benefit most from a universal basic income, because they're the ones that will be able to collect that taxation, make those savings. And if you look at how Wales, I think that it's really important that we're reflecting this on a Welsh perspective, though, and what it means. Wales has been failed repeatedly by Westminster. When we're talking about those imbalances and the need for equality, the fact that Wales is just been failed, not just decade after decade, not just year after year, but decade after decade. And I think this is an opportunity to work to address lots of those imbalances that have led to things like child poverty, as well as vast inequalities in Wales.
Thank you, Amelia. We are going to come to a detailed section about the devolution and powers and things later on. But just on the same question then, and some of the points that you were making there, just like to bring Tomos in on it, really, just because I could see him nodding vigorously to all the points that that you were making there. So, Tomos, did you have any sort of viewpoints on it at all, or?
No, I just wanted to echo what Amelia just said. No, there's nothing more I could say about it, to be honest. That we need UBI, and we need it now, to be honest. Yes, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's it's good to see. I suppose we should expect, all from the same party should really have the same answers as well. But sometimes there are differences within a party, isn't there? So I could see you nodding, so I thought I might bring you in on that one. So if we're sort of happy to move on from that sort of question, I did allude to it in Amelia's answer just now. But given the current devolution settlement, what is the best way to deliver a UBI? Now I'm going to point this question at Lauren, if I could. Lauren, if you want to give your best answer possible, that'd be fab.
My best answer possible. Great. Well, I think I'm going to do a very politician-y thing and answer the question I wish I'd been asked, because in the run-up to firebreak in October, the First Minister asked the Chancellor whether or not we could have early access to the job retention scheme or a furlough extension, because we were going into lockdown earlier than England, and he even offered to pay for it, and the Chancellor refused. So that right there is the current devolution settlement. Even if we can pay to support Welsh citizens, even if we offer, even in a crisis, we are told no. So quite frankly, I'd throw the current devolution settlement right in the bin. Become an independent country is not a perfect solution, because we should all be equal in the union, but we're not. So to be frank, there's a choice to be made here. Do we sit around and wait for England to want a UBI, or do we take decisive action, do the right thing for the people of Wales? I know what my choice would be. At the end of the day, devolution only works when the people with power truly respect those who they're giving power to, and that just isn't happening in the UK. So sorry, it's not the answer you were looking for, but there it is.
It was an answer, and it was very interesting. Anthony, yeah, you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, just to echo a lot of what Lauren said, there's not anything to disagree with there. And it does highlight, I talked earlier about the cross-party support in Wales, and the UBI Lab campaign was brilliant at getting that debate to the Senate, getting the Senate to have that discussion and that vote, a decisive vote that the Senate was in favour of a UBI trial in Wales. And then just to hit that brick wall that they can't. Without the cooperation of the DWP and Westminster, they can't do it, because it would just impact. They could spend some money, they could run a trial somewhere and spend some money, but it would impact on people's benefits, impact on taxation. And it hit that brick wall that they're not allowed to do it. So like Lauren, I believe independence is the answer, the ultimate answer. In the short term, we want real devolution. We want devolution of welfare, we want devolution of policing and justice, so that Wales could make those decisions for itself. Because you hit that, and it's a really strange period for us, because we're obviously, like every other party, we're writing a manifesto, and we're writing a manifesto for a devolved administration election. And you have this internal struggle as well. Do we just talk about the things that the next Senate can do, or do we throw in there some of our vision for what the future green, fair Wales would look like? And it's striking that balance, so because a lot of the things, and it's not just UBI, if it's achieving net carbon zero at the pace needed, a lot of this stuff is beyond the remit of the Welsh government. So we have to look at that, and you do, it's a logical conversation. It does end up saying, well, yeah, an independent Wales would be able to make those choices for itself. I mean, I watched Adam Price on Sunday Politics a couple of weeks ago, and he'd done that same thing about the manifesto. He was talking about his vision for social care in Wales with a Plaid Cymru government. And the interviewer pointed out, yes, but that's not devolved. You haven't got the power to do that. How would you fund it? And I was very disappointed. His answer was, well, I'd ask the DWP for some more money. And that was such a fudge. It highlighted the issue here that, you know, it's not, unless we have something radical happens and we get a decent and fit government in the United Kingdom, you're not going to get UBI in Wales without either real increased devolution, but probably not without independence.
Yeah, and I think the topic of independence could be another event in itself, isn't it? But I think what COVID has definitely done, or you know, has highlighted some sort of inconsistencies in terms of how you know the English residents are treated in comparison to Welsh residents from central government. So you know, there is that conversation that we could go on to and probably be sitting here till next Thursday. But we don't have that time this evening. So thank you for that. Detailed answer again, Anthony. That'd be brilliant. Now, that's kind of it from our structured questions. What I'd like to do from this point onwards is have a look around in the chat or on our socials or anything like that to see if there's any questions from any viewers that are there, really. So I'm just going to have excuse me while I have a quick look through the chat and things to see if there's any questions. Okay, so there is a question from the chat. So we've got, how would you ensure that a flat rate UBI doesn't drive up inequality? Who would like to answer that one? Oh, Amelia, yeah, fab, thank you.
It's not just about the flat rate UBI. I mean, first of all, there will be pensioners would get a little bit more, and then also there would still be other ways for people to access funds. So it's that additional top up that will then look at people's unique situations. So when we look at the inequalities that we have at the moment, I think that, you know, we've already seen a massive failure of people with disabilities, with where to begin, with people who have cuts to funding, with people being told that they're fit for work. The current system is failing people with disabilities in an astounding way that is actually leaving blood on the government's hands, to be frank. It's we see people with diabetes being able to keep their insulin cold because they can't pay their electricity bills. The state that we're in has to be solved. And so with that aspect of how we ensure that there is that basic support net for everybody, that basic safety net for everyone from a financial basis, there are then opportunities to support people's other individual needs. But also, I mean, I've said it wasn't a silver bullet, and that's because we also need other services as well. And those better investment in services as a whole is a vital part of how we ensure that we address inequalities as well.
Yeah, I start with what Amelia saying there. You know, like you said at the beginning of the event, it's not a silver bullet to hit things like poverty, but it's a start. You know, like I said to you earlier, I work in housing. There's a lot of government grants in terms of energy poverty and things. Now, if people have the cash in their pocket to be able to pay for the extra bits of energy, we could relocate that money to other things, you know, like renewable energies and things that would make things a lot easier for Welsh government and not just its residents. But yeah, I completely agree. So there's another couple of questions, and I'm conscious of the time. So we've got half an hour to get to, and there's not a lot at the moment. So if you can make your answers a bit longer, that'd be great. So one of the questions that we've got in the chat. So Andrew Curry has said, will it be paid for by taxing the rich? And will they also receive UBI? So would anyone like to come in on that one?
Oh, Thomas.
Yeah, Tomos, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, yes, absolutely. Taxing the rich is something, one thing that we definitely need to do. The richest in our country currently don't pay enough tax, and we need to be taxing them a lot more generally anyway. But to fund the UBI, absolutely, we need to be taxing the rich. What was the other part? Sorry.
The other bit was, let me just go back up for you. And would they also receive UBI?
Yes. Essentially, yes. That's what makes it universal. But but I think the main point is when it comes to universal basic income, you know, it's about redistributing the money in our current welfare states. You know, we need to be giving, we need to be making a fairer and actually better safety security net, so that people, you know, in Wales particular, because that's where we're concerned in Wales, obviously, but in the UK just generally, we need to be making sure that every single person has their basic needs met. We shouldn't be we shouldn't be talking about people not being able to live in a house, or being able not being able to charge being able to pay their electric bill or their heating bill or their food bill. That shouldn't be the case. And if it means giving some money to the rich, well, so be it, I'm afraid.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Anthony, yeah.
Sorry, Lauren.
Okay, it's really interesting that people are so worried about giving a universal basic income to the rich, and I don't often hear those same people complaining that we're giving a state pension to the rich, because all pensioners get a state pension. If it isn't given to everyone, it's not universal, but it absolutely should be progressively taxed back. That is how I personally would do it, but you don't remove the stigma, give everyone a safety net and all the other benefits of UBI without giving it to everyone.
Yeah, Amelia, yeah.
And when you look at the amount that, if we had a progressive taxation system, which is so essential at the moment, people wouldn't actually be earning more. But I'd just like to highlight another tax that I think is really essential that we talk about, not just wealth tax, but during COVID, the same two words have echoed through my head the entire time, and that's a windfall tax. The fact that right now there are people out of work, there are people struggling to make ends meet, there are more people dependent on food banks than ever, and yet Amazon is raking in the profits when they don't even pay tax in the UK. Is them taking advantage of a crisis whilst people in this country are being failed. And I think there are many ways that we need to look at how our tax system ensures the support of the citizens, of people in this country.
Yeah, Anthony, yeah.
Just to add, yeah, everything's been said really, but yeah, it goes, you give it to everyone because it's not universal otherwise, and it's like all means testing. The cutoff point becomes the political football. That becomes what parties argue over, where it stops. And as Lauren said, it comes back in taxation. But I just want to say on this subject, I did a sixth form debate hustings in an election a few years ago, and this came up. And one very angry sixth former asked me if that meant that we would give UBI to George Osborne, the Chancellor at the time. And it's the first time I've had an audience hiss at a hustings. But yes, we would give George Osborne universal basic income.
Yeah, and from my point of view, the infrastructure that comes along with that as well, it gets payments faster, quicker, doesn't it? You know, so if somebody falls on hard times, then that infrastructure is already there for every single person within the UK to get that money to them. So no, I completely agree with that. Everybody should have it, hence the name universal. But not only because it's a policy, but just to make that payment and those transactions far more linear. So just to move on to another questions. So we've got one on universal basic services. So what are the panel's thoughts about universal basic services?
I mean, the universal basic income and universal basic services must go hand in hand, and to pit them against each other just kind of undermines how we need to be supporting people. Every aspect of our society must be about how we benefit people and as well as our environment. And I think that if we're trying to pitch one against the other, then it's not looking at how these things are interconnected and interlinked and why they're both so important. So yeah, both universal basic income and universal basic services are really essential.
It's just one quick point that I've just seen in the chat. It's just among students. So it's not something we talk about that often during these events and things. Really, it's never high up on the list. But how would a UBI sort of change things for students? Because I know what as you can see, the guitars and stuff behind me. My first passion when I was growing up was music, and one of the biggest things for me not going into the music industry was the fact that in order for you to get experience, you get paid very little money that you're not going to be able to live on, in essence. And even if you were to go down the sort of technical side of it, you still wouldn't earn money for a long time. So in terms of students, how would a UBI benefit students?
I'll answer this one because I haven't seen it myself. One thing I would say, you know, I think many students come into degrees and they don't necessarily think about what the outcome should be. Maybe, perhaps, you know, and when it does come to that time, they find that, oh, it's a bit risky, or oh, I'm not too sure about it, even though I really want to go into it. And I think that's such a shame. I think that's such a shame, really, that happens, because I think if we're going to make a better society, it shouldn't matter where you are on the income scale or whatever. It should be an integral part of you that you enjoy what you do, and that you enjoy and feel that where you are in sort of employment status is right. And what I would say is what a UBI can do is it can actually help fund that venture that you really want to come. You don't have to think about, oh, well, this is going to be too risky for me. You have that safety net of saying, hey, even if this doesn't really, even if there are quiet periods, even if there are periods where financially I can't do this, if I didn't have a UBI, I have at least a payment that I can survive on. And I think that's something I would say that's the answer to that question, I think.
Yeah, fabulous. Yeah, Amelia.
I actually had education and the arts in my notes because I realized I had missed it out at the start. So I'm really glad this question came up. I did some work with Billy Lunn from the Subways on why UBI is really essential to the arts. There was focus on the music industry, but people like Rachel Paris, who's a comedian, signed up as well as music festivals and things like that. Green Gathering signed up. And it was basically reflecting on the fact that things like a career in music becomes something of an elitist opportunity. And it's the same with so many things: entrepreneurship, setting up your own business. It's just these should be opportunities for everyone and not just the few. Now, everyone's not going to be a talented musician, but if you look at someone like Billy, so people who signed it were it kind of completely ranged from the Charlatans, the Subways. There were some really big hitters on there, and but you know, Billy grew up in a council house. He was lucky. He's like, I was just, the right thing came at the right time. We were given an opportunity on an introducing stage, and we were just lucky. And if things had been different, we wouldn't have been able to pursue our talents. And I think that, you know, the arts and culture is really the lifeblood of our society. It's like how we identify ourselves, and it's and you, especially here in Wales, I think that there's so much of part of our arts and culture and our music, and the musicians and the you know, the comedians. We're so proud of these people, and yet we're not supporting everybody to pursue those ambitions or opportunities in whatever field that might be. And I think that, yeah, there are many ways that I think UBI would support artists, but it's just everything in the music industry, so in the arts sector at the moment, has just been completely destroyed by COVID. We see most people in the arts also have jobs in hospitality and have really missed out. And I think this is why talking about these conversations, having these conversations now about a universal basic income is so important, because while we saw the furlough scheme being rolled out, this was actually an opportunity to think quite differently about how we support people into the future. And, you know, those people, if we came out of this with our arts and culture thriving, there's a quote by Winston Churchill, which apparently wasn't him, that was like, during the war, they said, why aren't you cutting funding to arts? And he said something, well, he apparently didn't say, that if we don't have arts, then what are we fighting for? And to be honest, during all of this, what's been keeping me going is music and films and comedy and all of these things that have been failed to be invested in, especially throughout austerity. And yet people are still pouring their lives, their talents, their time into being creative. And I think that we should be grateful for that industry, for what the support that they've given throughout the pandemic.
Yeah, Anthony, yeah.
I think just to echo that, my point really does echo that. Alan McGee once said, and Alan McGee was the founder of Creation Records, manager of Primal Scream, the man who discovered Oasis and who made Oasis. And he once said, so he's my generation, and he once said, it was that age in the early 80s when you could live in our cities for a reasonable rent. The unemployment benefit wasn't overly generous, but it wasn't as punitive as it is now. You had just enough money to get by. And he's often argued the case that if that hadn't been there, that whole wave of 10 years of bans that dominated the music industry across the world, they would never have established without that safety net that they could spend 5 years in London or Birmingham, building up their career, living on basically a universal basic income, a guaranteed amount of money every week. And it just echoes everything Amelia said, that without that, and so many artists came, the young British artists came out of that. That was that period of time. And that is why it's so crucial, and we can never underestimate, completely agree with Amelia, the importance and the value that the arts and culture bring to us, which is one of the key arguments for UBI.
No, definitely. I completely agree with you as well on that point. You know, some of my most favorite bands are bands from underprivileged backgrounds that have made it, and they've written songs about their underprivileged backgrounds. Well, currently society doesn't give them opportunity to express that on stage, not just because of COVID, but before that. You know, your live bands and your music in performance venues has got very small over the last couple of years, simply because people don't go out to the pub as often anymore. So we have to rely on things like universal basic income for people to be creative within their own homes, record their own music and get that out there. So it allows them that voice to be able to live at the same time as doing. So I completely, you know, it's something that I'm very passionate about, but it's great to see that you guys are passionate about it as well. To move on to something completely different. And Bernard has asked the question, would there still be a minimum wage with a UBI in place? Yes, Amelia.
We don't think that there should be a minimum wage anyway. We think there should be a genuine living wage that means that people can put food on their table and a roof over their heads without worrying about living in poverty. And this isn't about people's wages as such. So there shouldn't be any kind of point where we're removing that floor. What we want to do is raise the opportunities that people have.
Yeah,
I think also it's worth adding, it would have a good effect on wages, because suddenly some of those really precarious gig economy jobs wouldn't be so attractive if there's a UBI. We'd be getting back to a stage where there could be some bargaining power for your labour. So that would also help push wages up. People wouldn't be forced into taking exploitative jobs. So those jobs would have to be made more attractive to get people to do them.
Yeah, and I think on that point as well, a question that I would ask is, does that give people who are in sort of low skilled jobs a little bit more power then? You know, does it give them that opportunity to challenge things? Amelia?
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a job going at Newport Way Savers. There's a job that you can do where you look into the machine all day, and if little bits of that film like plastic goes through, you have to pull it out. And that's a minimum wage job, but it's essential to the functioning of the entire operation. if people didn't feel like they had it, would that be a minute? Nothing against Newport Waste Savers, obviously, really incredible organisation. But should that be a minimum wage job? Because very few people stay in it for a long period because it's such a hard job. Actually, it's really hard to be there all day and being diligent at doing this job. Should it be minimum wage? And I think you're right. If we changed people's needs, it would change how essential work would no longer look like minimum wage work.
No, absolutely. And that's been apparent through the pandemic, isn't it? We've relied so much on shop workers. One of my mates manages an Iceland. And the behavior of people towards those people who are on minimum wage, in essence, has been deplorable. So, yeah, I think what the pandemic has done is provided us that viewpoint now that these essential workers are on low paid money. That needs to increase tenfold, and obviously a UBI can give them that power almost to hold their employers to account, which I think will be absolutely fabulous for it. So I'm just going to have a look for some more questions. Just checking the chat. Okay, so doesn't seem like there's any further questions, but what I could do at this point, we've got a little bit of time left. I know we're quite close to the end, but is there any other sort of topics of conversation relating to a UBI that any of the panel would like to address? Is there anything that we haven't addressed, or indeed anybody that's currently in the call themselves would like to put their hand up and ask something through the microphone? Yep, there's a hand up there. Johnny, can we unmute? Ines, yeah, if you can unmute, that'd be great. Yep, there we go. Fire away.
Hi. I'm also a member of the Green Party, and one of the aspects of the UBI that I think is really important is that it stops what's happening at the moment, which is the levelling down, where government are saying you can't have benefits at a decent rate because people on benefits aren't allowed to have more than people in work. And then the levels of work in themselves are so low. So we've just got a perpetual downward spiral at the moment, which is punitive for people on benefits. And that's one of the main reasons I support UBI. And I don't know what my fellow Green Party members think about that.
Well, it's exactly why it has to be universal, isn't it? It's that UBI, to take away that stigma and playing groups off against each other, the deserving poor or the scroungers or the shirkers or your neighbour who doesn't open his curtains till 3 o'clock. It takes all that away because everyone's getting a universal basic income.
I think I agree with a lot of what you just said. Actually, the benefit system is punitive and suspicious by nature. I'm still in receipt of tax credits. Believe it or not, tax credits still exist. And despite giving them no reason to suspect otherwise, they sent me a letter the other day asking if I was still single so that they could update their claim. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. Thanks for that. The fact is, we've got so many more working poor now than we had. And you're right, it really is a levelling down, and a UBI would just remove that for so many people.
Absolutely. I've got one last question. It's quite a long one, so I think this might take us to the end of it now, really. So just while I read this. So do the panel agree that a strong argument for a UBI is the idea that is a financial win-win, as it is described in Utopia for Realists? So not only does it tick the moral justice argument, but it also ticks the economic argument, and it's almost unarguable. See why I struggle to get that out, can't you?
The short answer is yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that'd take us 10 minutes, but that didn't today. Is there anybody else like to elaborate on that, or anyone in the audience even?
I think it goes back to that silver bullet question, that silver bullet point as well, that I do agree that there are so many wins, but it doesn't mean that we should take our eye off the ball of the other issues that we need. So we still need things like a rent cap and other things to ensure that the people, exploitative people, don't exploit the fact that there's more, well, that people might have more money. And so I think that there are so many different aspects. When you're looking at system change, this really does fundamentally change the system. It means that everybody has a similar kind of baseline of financial power, and that, as I've said before, that people shouldn't slip through those safety nets. But it also just, we still need a better funded NHS. We still need to stop the privatization of the NHS. There are so many other aspects that just this one area of system change won't fundamentally change. And I think obviously bringing in that environmental perspective as well, I think it's really important that that does go hand in hand as systemic change to reduce our carbon emissions and ensure we don't go past 1.5 degrees of warming. And there are all of these different points to get to that utopia. I've not actually read Utopia for Realists, but I'm sure that there are many aspects of that utopia that need to be changed, changes that need to happen to get there. So yeah, but what they all have in common is that it's systemic change that's needed, because you know, I often think about architects when I think about this. Sometimes architects need to tear something down to build something better. And that's where we are at the moment. The foundations of what we have are so rickety. You can't keep trying to renovate it. It has to be torn out to build something better in its place.
Absolutely. And I think, as was mentioned earlier, it's only the start of a conversation, isn't it? It's the first step towards equality and fairness. Yeah, Amelia's absolutely right. It's not the silver bullet. But it starts a conversation. You start talking about fairness and justice and equality. You can't put the genie back in the lamp there. You have to make the wholesale changes that are needed.
Yeah, definitely. I've been informed that Bernard has his hand up. I can't see it on my screen, so I do apologise. My screen's obviously too small. So if guys would like to unmute Bernard for me, please, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Someone's saying it was a win-win scenario. It's actually paradoxically one of the reasons why I know people who are on the sort of fairly far left object to it is because there are fairly right-wing economists who can see the sense of it. You know, and it seems to me actually that's one of the good things about it is it actually appeals to a fairly large, broad spectrum of people with different political views. You know, so I said there are. I mean, someone like Milton Friedman was in favour of a form of UBI. So, and then of course there are sort of more left-wing arguments for it. So it seems to me that one actually could probably be able to make a case for it that would appeal to a fairly wide variety of people.
Yeah, you finished it. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, definitely. I think, but that's what we found in terms of running the lab through Wales, is that the diverse amount of people that are actually interested in getting involved with a UBI. So I don't know where anyone on the panel wanted to come in on that last point, I guess, before we wrapped up, or yeah, Amelia.
Sometimes the right thing to do isn't a left or right issue. And I think that I spoke before about putting checks in place to ensure that people don't find ways to exploit a situation. But I think the way that people are seeing this as essential and are seeing the sense of why, again, from an economic perspective, not necessarily the best way of measuring its impact, that does make sense. I think the fact that they that there's an agreement is so powerful, and it just we have other areas. I've mentioned the NHS a few times. We do have other areas where the left and the right do agree, but again, it's like a different vision sometimes. As we've seen with the NHS, that might be privatizing some parts of it while it's still being free at the point of service, but behind the closed doors there's still privatization, whereas the left would want the NHS in fully public hands. That still means that we're supported by an NHS in some system, and that's kind of very fundamental to the welfare of people across the country.
Definitely, yeah, absolutely. I'm conscious of the time, and I know that people might have other engagements after this, so we have got 5 minutes left. But just before we wrap up, I'd like to, if we could, take some closing remarks from the panelists, really, if that's okay. So Anthony, I think can we start with yourself? We'll go down in order that I read out the names earlier, just to make it easier for me, because that's the order you are on my screen, and I'll get lost. So Anthony, if we can start with you, that'd be fab. On closing remarks, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for organising it. Thanks for inviting us, and thanks to everyone who's contributed. A stimulating discussion as we knew it would be. Some really good points have been made. I don't think there's much to add to the points that have come up in the discussion about UBI and why it's a good thing and why its time is now. So I'd just like to pay credit to UBI Lab Cymru for the incredible organisation and the way you've got this campaign off the ground so quickly and across local authorities across Wales. It's really inspiring, and you've really hit the zeitgeist. You've really got your moment right, and just really pleased that Wales Green Party are here to support your campaign in any way we can. We're on the same side of this argument. And again, oh yes, I did have one question. I'm just going back from what Bernard was saying. Have you now got pledges from every party in the Senate?
Sam, can we check that? Have we?
No,
I don't think we have we?
So the Conservatives, unfortunately, not.
Not yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, just thank you, and look forward to more of these events.
Yeah, no, thank you, Anthony. That means a lot. We've worked tirelessly to get to this point, but we wouldn't have got to this point without the support of you guys, in essence, from start to finish. So thank you for that. We appreciate it, and that's from all the Wales Lab. So Amelia, can I just take your closing remarks, please, if that's okay?
Yeah, I want to add to that thanks, and also say thanks to everyone who came. It's great to see so many familiar names and faces, as well as new names and faces. And just, I think that we've seen a universal basic income come up in the news occasionally, and people talk about it in a range of different ways. I can't help but think about the 2015 general election, where Greens were criticised for wanting a universal basic income. And we put the argument out there about why it was important. And it was incredible to see how that started a conversation. But with it being a general election period, it was brief, it was short, the next thing happened, people moved on. And what's happened now is a much vaster conversation that I think people's imaginations have really been captured. We've reflected on COVID and where we are now. And I think that as we've been locked down, as we've seen our entire kind of social contracts, our entire systems fall apart, people are thinking about big ideas in a much kind of more engaging way. And it's really exciting to see what the possibilities that could be in the future as a result of thinking about the big picture, the big ambitions and the big visions for the future.
Fab, thank you very much. And Lauren, then please, closing remarks.
I'd just like to say that this is a critical moment, not just for UBI, but for all of society. And it's not just on the politicians on the panel or in the Senedd to get us to a world where we are all equal. It's on all of us to push for the Wales we want. So for anybody who is watching right now who isn't a politician, here's what you can do. You can lobby your candidates to sign the pledge. You can sign the petition that UBI Lab Wales already have. You can start your own lab. I've just co-founded UBI Lab Newport. And if you're in Newport, you can come and volunteer with me. I'd be happy to have you. And on May the 6th, you can vote for the Wales you want. On the regional list, it's proportional. Don't vote with your tactics. Vote with your heart and vote. Am I allowed to say vote green? I'm assuming I'm allowed to say vote green. So vote green.
Thank you, Laura. That's brilliant. And Tomos, you finally.
Oh, wow.
Follow that.
I've got to follow up. Thank you a lot. But no, I'd just like to echo. Thanks again to UBI Wales. You do a really, really good job in promoting UBI in Wales, and definitely carry on the good work that you're doing. To everyone who's on the call today, please lobby your candidates to sign this pledge, because it is probably it is one of the biggest things that you could do in this Senate election. Well, and vote Green, of course, but that's something that's another thing to do. But no, lobby your candidates, annoy them as much as you can if they haven't signed this, because we really need to push for a Wales, again, echoing what Lauren's saying, a Wales that we want, a Wales that we have the power to change. We have the power to change how things are done in Wales, and the best way you could do that is voting for a party that believes that as well. And again, vote Green.
Thank you, Tomos. Thanks very much. Okay, so thank you everybody for attending, whether you've been on the panel or whether you've actually been in the audience. It's always great to see new faces. And faces that have been here many times before. We like an event here in UBI Lab Wales, so keep an eye on our Twitter. I'm sure we'll be announcing further events further down the line. But I'm going to do my little pledge plug now. So please make sure you sign the public pledge. It is important to us. It's important for us to be able to mobilize UBI conversation further. What we want fundamentally is everybody talking about UBI. If we're talking about UBI, it's an option then for people to think about when they actually go and put their tick in the box. Okay, so that's all that we started this off from. It's just to get people talking about it, because we fundamentally believe that it paves the way realistically to start bringing that poverty level down in Wales. And that fundamentally is what we want. So again, thank you very much for attending this evening. Like I said, this event has been live on YouTube and will be recorded. So if you wish, like, comment, and subscribe. I feel like a YouTuber now. So thank you very much to everyone for coming tonight. Take care and have a lovely evening.
And thank you for your amazing chairing, Liam.
No problem. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye now.